Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10, Text 22. Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva mayam prakritim shishrikshatim Swajiva mayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusashara shastrakrit Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva mayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva mayam prakritim sasrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva mayam prakritim sasrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva mayam prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva maya prakritim sasrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit Saeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva maya prakritim sisrikshatim Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano anusasara shastrakrit. Mataji. Sayeva bhuyo nijavirya choditam Swajiva maya prakritim sasrikshati Anamarupatmani rupanamani Vidhit samano nusasara shastrakrit. Synonyms. Saha, he, eva, thus, bhuyaha, again, nija, own personal, virya, potency, choditam, performance of, swa, own, jiva, living being, mayam, external energy, prakritim, unto material nature, sisrikshatim, while creating, anama, without mundane designation, rupa atmani, forms of the soul, rupa namani, forms and names, vidhit samanaha, desiring to award, anusashara, entrusted, shastrakrit, the compiler of the revealed scripture. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. The personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to His parts and parcels, the living entities, placed them under the guidance of material nature. By His own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. Translation with repetition. The personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to His parts and parcels, the living entities, placed them under the guidance of material nature. By His own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. Purport. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord. They are of two varieties, namely Nitya Mukta and Nitya Baddha. The Nitya Muktas are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternally engaged in the reciprocation of transcendental loving service with the Lord in His eternal abode, far abode, beyond the manifested mundane creations. But the Nitya Baddha, or eternally conditioned souls, are entrusted to His external energy, Maya, for rectification of the rebellious attitude toward the Supreme Father. Nitya Baddhas are eternally grateful, eternally forgetful. Nitya Baddhas are eternally forgetful of their relation with the Lord as parts and parcels. They are bewildered by the illusory energy as products of matter, and thus they are very busy in making plans in the material world for becoming happy. They go on merrily with plans, but by the will of the Lord, both the plan makers and the plans are annihilated at the end of a certain period, as above mentioned. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.7 as follows. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all the living beings, all the living entities merge into my nature. And again, when the time of creation is ripe, I begin creation by the agency of my external energy. The word bhuyaha indicates again and again. That is to say, the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation is going on perpetually by the external energy of the Lord. He is the cause of everything. But the living beings who are constitutionally part and parcel of the Lord and are forgetful of the sweet relation are given a chance again and again to get rid of the clutches of the external energy and to revive the living beings, consciousness, The revealed scriptures are also created by the Lord. Vedic literatures are the guiding directions for the conditioned souls so they can get free from the repetition of creation and annihilation of the material world and the material body. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, this created world and material energy are under my control. By the influence of Prakriti, automatically they are created again and again, and this is done by me through the agency of my external energy. Actually, the spiritual spark living entities have no material names or forms, but in order to fulfill their desire to lord it over the material energy of material forms and names, they are given a chance for such false enjoyment. And at the same time, they are given a chance to understand the real position through the revealed scriptures. The foolish and forgetful living being is always busy with false forms and false names. Modern nationalism is a culmination of such false names and false forms. Men are mad after false name and form. The form of body obtained under the certain conditions is taken up as factual. And the name also taken bewilders the conditioned soul into misusing the energy, the name of so many isms. The scriptures, however, supply the clue for understanding the real position, but men are reluctant to take lessons from the scriptures created by the Lord for different places and times. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is a guiding principle for all human beings, but by the spell of material energy, they do not take care to carry out the programs of life in terms of the Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavatam is a postgraduate study of knowledge for one who has thoroughly understood the principles of Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, people have no taste for them, and therefore they are under the clutches of Maya for repetition of birth and death. Thus ends the wonderful transcendental Bhakti Vedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yen Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. We are now getting a chance to see the exalted positions of the Purastris. These are ladies of Hastinapura. They are standing on the rooftops and they are having sanjalpa, discussions among themselves. And we have seen in Bhagavatam, this is one of the several occasions in Bhagavatam when the simplicity of the ladies is contrasted with the depth of their knowledge, and they are glorified. Another place where this happens is Kunti Maharani's prayers. We have already gone through that. And, sorry, did someone say something? No. And here, this is another place in Bhagavatam, extremely important scene here. We have seen before how when Krishna was, he boarded the chariot, beautiful chariot, decorated very nicely. Various personalities came and made various presentations. And personally, Uddhava and Satyaki were fanning him. And there were Brahmanas, learned scholars, who are glorifying him in wonderful Vedic verses, hymns. But then the scene shifts to the rooftops, from where these ladies are having a conversation. Today is the 22nd verse. This conversation started from 21st verse and will go on till the 30th verse. So 10 verses, and you will see as soon as such important scene comes in Bhagavatam, immediately you will see that Prabhupada's purports also are becoming longer, deeper. Of course, every verse in Bhagavatam is important. There is no unimportant verse being absolute. But then there are verses or there are sections in Bhagavatam, especially when there are instructions by pure devotees, prayers, and such occasions that that you now suddenly become more serious because something extraordinary is being spoken. And Bhagavatam is a compilation of such narrations, such conversations and instructions, and they are interspersed with interesting activities that are happening in the background. Those activities, when we focus on those activities, you will see that Bhagavatam is reading faster. You can read faster. And then you suddenly come, it is like swimming in a small river, suddenly the river opens into an ocean, and suddenly the pace slows. And now we have to take a step back and look at, okay, what is being spoken here. And you'll see how how the conversation happening between these ladies of Hastinapur, how they are gradually ascending in their ecstasy, and what is the depth of their understanding and their feelings towards the Lord, and how it ascends in the coming verses. So I would request all of you to try to maintain that context as we go through these several weeks of discussion about or contemplation about the discussion between the ladies of Hastinapura. In today's verse, there is a reference to the Lord's potency of repeated creation and annihilation. It's the same Lord. When they are referring to Krishna standing there downstairs, see, look at the simplicity of, and see how the devotional service and the understanding or relationship with Krishna is how it is completely independent of the social position of a person. Put yourself for a minute on the rooftop of Hastinapura. You look down, there is Krishna sitting in the chariot, and a swarm of men, all highly positioned men. There is Yudhishthira, the Pandavas are there. There is Uddhava, there is Satyaki, there are all those exalted Brahmanas who are very, very highly placed in the society. And these ladies are here in the rooftop, so societal norms do not allow them to go downstairs and go near Krishna like that. And you could simply be standing here and perhaps be talking about any matter, subject matter, because you're so far away, you're not even part of the proceedings really. The men are not even looking up or caring about what these women are doing. But the position of these ladies of Hastinapura is such, so exalted and so pure, that regardless of their position in society, their knowledge of Krishna is far above many of the persons who are standing downstairs. And it is such that it is attracting Krishna himself, that he is noticing. And you will see at the end of these conversations, Krishna notices and smiles, and he acknowledges their feelings. But it is not that he calls them down and says, okay, you are the most exalted person here, why don't you come and stand in the front? It doesn't say that. The way the society is treating a person is completely independent of a person, a pure devotee's relationship with the Supreme Lord. Another example in modern times is Namachari Haridas Thakur, who was born in a Mohammedan family, and he never once asked that he should be let inside the Jagannath Puri temple. The societal norms was that persons born in such families, they were not allowed inside the temple. But he did not insist that I should go inside. He simply stayed outside, and his relationship with the Lord was such that the Lord would go and see him every day. So the position of a person and the relationship with the Lord are not dependent at all, are not related to each other. The social position can be anything, and one's devotion in the heart to the Lord is acknowledged by the Lord regardless of any material condition. So that is the context in which this conversation is happening, and our veneration and our feeling towards these Hastinapura ladies, that background, if it is there in our mind about such a position of these persons, that they're not at all bothered about their position in society, and in spite of that they have such depth of knowledge, that feeling of veneration allows us to take these verses seriously. And also Prabhupada's purports, of course, are exceptional. Today's verse purport is a little long. We'll only be able to see certain portions of this. So let us look at this aspect, starting from yesterday's verse that Prabhu covered. Let's just take a brief look at that, because there is some overlap between that and today's verse. We had seen this verse yesterday. Can you please repeat after me? Janasya Krishnad Vimukhasya Deivad Adharmashilasya Sudukhitasya Anugrahayeha Charanti Nunam Bhutani Bhavyani Janardanasya. The translation says, O my Lord, great philanthropic souls travel on the earth on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to show compassion to the fallen souls who are averse to the sense of subordination to the Lord. So we saw yesterday how, this, in context of this verse, Srila Prabhupada has traveled all over the earth on behalf of the Supreme Lord to show compassion to people like us who are averse to the sense of subordination to the Lord. And today, we will see a little bit more details about exactly how averse we are. And that is a little bit more interesting also, to see how averse we are and how futile our hopes are in being subordinate. Because as the prayers today say, today's verse says, that the Lord entrusts such living beings, the insubordinate living beings, to his external energy. That is the verse today. And on the one hand, he's entrusting to the external energy. What is the purpose of entrusting? When we entrust, let us say there's a small child and you have to go somewhere, or you want to admit the child in a school, you are entrusting the child to the teachers. And the purpose is that the child should go through education. How many, for those who have children or who have been children, anybody here who has not been a child? I don't think so. All of us have been children. If you were given a choice, either go to school or don't go to school. I know I've asked this question before. I know there are one or two exceptions. So I won't ask again. But I know, by and large, all of us would say we don't want to go to school. But I know Chaitanya Prabhu will say, no, I always wanted to go to school. Very few exceptions. Given a choice, you would rather sleep in the bed, just lie down and not wake up, and wake up whenever you want to wake up, and then do whatever you want to do. None of us really want to go to school and be subject to the discipline of the school. But still, the affectionate parents, they send the children to school and they entrust the children to the teachers there for education. But the child is not interested, by and large. Children are not interested, and so the school has to come up with so many different ways to make the child interested. There comes with storytelling and activities, fun time, all those kinds of things are done just so that the child remains interested in what is being spoken. Actually, there is no need for a school to teach sports or any other such things. Complete waste of time. But still they do that. Why? Because the child has the inclination to play. If the child is not given a safe environment to play, then the child will do so in an unsafe environment. So better that the child is given some release of energy, otherwise child is sitting and constantly jumping up and down. Instead, okay, you go 1 hour, you play whatever you want, exhaust your energy, come back and listen to what I have to say. So, interesting means it is meant for education. It is meant to curtail the tendency to be insubordinate. What is, after all, from a societal point of view, the government and the society wants children to grow up to be law-abiding citizens, not insubordinate, carefree individuals who will just do anything they want. Society is then in a chaos. Affectionate father wants their child to be well-educated and law-abiding. But what is our position? That is in the first line of this verse. Janasya Krishnad Vimukhasya Daivad. The common man, Janasya, common man, Krishna, Supreme Lord, Vimukhasya, one who has turned his face against the Lord, Daivat, by the influence of external energy. So here, there seems to be a contradiction. On one hand, the Lord is entrusting the living entity to the external energy for education. But here it is saying, by the influence of external energy, he is being vimukhad, or turning his face away. So let us see why that is, and let's also look at this principle of vimukhasya. There is another wonderful verse which is there in Chaitanya Charitamrita. But before that, we'll just read this small purport snippet which Prabhu had said yesterday. To be obedient to the wishes of Supreme Lord is the natural position of every living entity. But only due to past misdeeds, a living entity becomes averse to the sense of subordination to the Lord and suffers all the miseries of material existence. No one has anything to do but render devotional service to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Therefore, any activity other than the transcendental loving service to the Lord is more or less a rebellious action against the Supreme Will. All fruitive activity, empirical philosophy and mysticism are more or less against the sense of subordination to the Lord. And any living entity engaged in such rebellious activity is more or less condemned by the laws of material nature, which work under the subordination of the Lord. So, only due to past misdeeds, a living entity becomes averse to the sense of subordination to the Lord and suffers all the miseries of material existence. So the past misdeeds of a person makes a person insubordinate, and to help the person reform, this material energy helps the person completely forget the Lord, which he is already insubordinate to. So better than being insubordinate to the Lord because if you constantly remember the Lord, the desire to be insubordinate cannot be fulfilled. A person who is insubordinate and wants to enjoy in his insubordination is not possible to enjoy like that while you are always remembering the Lord. So the external energy of the Lord helps him forget the Lord, which he always wanted to do. And then, because the Lord wants the living entity through his free will to remember the Lord again, the Lord then also uses the external energy to correct him and remind him that he is actually subordinate to the Lord in all circumstances. And at the same time, he Shastrakrit, through the Vedic literatures, as well as himself, as he personally appears, and himself as in the form of pure devotee, as Acharya, he instructs the living entity so that he might revive his original position and come back to Godhead. So this situation where living entity is becoming forgetful is also explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita in the following way. Please repeat after me. Krishna bhuli se jiva anade bahirmukha ateva maya tare de samsara dukha. Krishna bhuli se jiva, that is, Krishna bhuli is having forgotten Krishna. Se jiva is this living entity. Anadi bahirmukha, from time immemorial, He has been attracted by the external feature, bahirmukha. External feature means, it means he is not attracted to Krishna. Instead, he is attracted to the external energy of Krishna. Ataiva, therefore, Maya, the illusory energy, Tare, to him, they gives samsara dukkha, the miseries of material existence. The living entity who has forgotten Krishna is attracted by the external side of the existence of time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy Maya inflicts all kinds of material miseries on the living entity. And in this verse, before I go to this verse, let me go back to this previous slide where I had a section of today's purport. Let's just read this one more time, a portion of this. The living entities are parts and parcels of Lord. But, so look at this next. They are of two varieties, namely Nitya Mukta and Nitya Baddha. The Nitya Muktas are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternally engaged in the reciprocation of transcendental loving service with the Lord in his eternal abode beyond the manifested mundane creations. So there's a large number of such completely liberated persons, Nitya Muktas, who are eternally engaged in the spiritual world, in the reciprocation of transcendental loving service with the Lord. But there are some living entities who belong to the second category. What is the second category? But the Nitya Baddha, or the eternally conditioned souls, are entrusted to his external energy, Maya, of their rebellious attitude toward the Supreme Father. So this rectification by external energy, how does external energy do this? And that you can see in this verse which we just read. It is done by inflicting all kinds of material miseries on the living entity. This is the process of rectification. So if we are wondering, why are we suffering? Why are we going through this difficulty? We don't think like that, of course, when we have material enjoyment. But when we have suffering, we are thinking, why is this coming upon me? What mistake did I do? We forget that the original mistake that we have done is to be rebellious against Krishna. And now we are under the rectification process, and whether it is the enjoyment that we are getting or the miseries that we are getting, they are both part of the rectification process. When we are trying to, let us look at the purport of this verse. When the living entity forgets his natural occupational position of the eternal service to Krishna, he immediately becomes entangled in the illusory external energy. The living entity is originally part and parcel of Krishna and belongs to Krishna's superior energy. He has a tiny, inconceivable energy that works within his body in an inconceivable way. However, due to forgetfulness of his natural occupational position, the living entity falls into the realm of material energy. The living entity is called the marginal energy because he is spiritual by nature, but due to his forgetfulness, he is prone to fall under the influence of material energy. In other words, he can live in both spiritual and material energies, and therefore he is called the marginal energy. In this marginal position, he is sometimes attracted by external illusory energy, and from that moment on, his material existence begins. When he falls into the realm of material energy, he becomes subject to the influence of time, with its three phases, past, present, and future. Past, present, and future are present only in the material world. They do not exist in the spiritual world. The jiva, the soul, is eternal. He existed before the creation of the material world. Unfortunately, he forgot his relationship with Krishna. The forgetfulness of the soul is described herein by the word anadi, which indicates that his forgetfulness has been present in the soul since time immemorial. It should be understood that living entity is placed in the material world due to his desire to enjoy independently of Krishna as his rival. In the Bhagavatam, generally the bees are spoken of positively. Is that true or false? It is true. In Bhagavatam, bees are nice. How about crows? Are crows positive or negative? Negative. How about swans? Positive or negative? Positive. So swans have the ability to separate milk from water. If they see something where something good is mixed with something bad, the analogy of swan is given that it can take the nice thing from that. The crows, analogy of crows is given, they are always in filthy places. They're attracted by filth. Wherever there is more filth, the crows are there, attracted by filth. The bees, how are bees described? Attracted by flowers. Okay, what else? They take nectar. Saram saram samudritam. That is, they take the nectar from various flowers and they assimilate the nectar from everywhere. And that is what a bee does. Very usually, and then also when the Supreme Lord comes and his garland, it is given for flower, he comes with his flower garland, and it is described when the Lord comes in Vishnu 400 Narayana form. Not only you have very fragrant flowers, but there is also bees. They are called as drones that are buzzing around, and they create a wonderful transcendental sound buzzing around, and it's very pleasing atmosphere. So the bees are described in a very positive way. But there is one place in Bhagavatam where that is not so. There is one place in Bhagavatam, there may be more also, I have not fully read that. But there is certainly one place in Bhagavatam where the bees are not described in a positive way. Look at this image of the bee, such wonderful, beautiful bee, taking the nectar and nicely putting it in its honeycomb. But let us look at this one place in Bhagavatam where the bees, there is slightly negative way, or the aspect of a bee which is not so pleasant. This verse, I'm going to read it myself. Srishtam swasakyedam anupravishthas chaturvidham puram atmam sakena atho vidastam purusham santhamantar bhungte hrishikair madhusaragamya. This verse, it's part of prayers by Lord Shiva when he is speaking to the Prachetas. He's teaching them some wonderful prayers of the Supreme Lord. So Prachetas are devotees of the Lord, and by chance when they set out to perform, well, that is not by chance, when they set out to perform some austerities as part of their devotional service to the Lord, by chance they come into the audience of Lord Shiva. And also it is not by chance, because Lord Shiva wanted to give them audience. Lord Shiva, being the supermost devotee, Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambho, he became very compassionate about Prachetas and taught them some wonderful prayers that they could meditate upon, they could chant and meditate upon as a way of perfecting their devotional service. And one of those prayers is this verse. Srishtam sosaket shaktyedam anupravishthas chaturvidham puram atmatma shakena atma amshakena. Let us read the translation. My dear Lord, after creating your own potencies, you enter within the creation in 4 kinds of forms. Being within the hearts of the living entities, you know them and know how they are enjoying their senses. The so-called happiness of this material creation is exactly like the bee's enjoyment of honey after it has been collected in the honeycomb. So in this verse, just a side note, Bhungte Hrishikair Madhusara Gamya. Which word indicates the bees? You would think it is Madhu. We would associate the Madhu with honey. But actually Madhu means sweetness. Saragam is the bee. Saragam. And this word is being use saragam to describe the honey bee because they are collecting the honey. Honey, because it's being collected in the honey. So what happens after the bee collects the honey in the honeycomb? It is putting a lot of effort to collect the honey. It is said that 1 teaspoon of honey represents a lifetime of work of a dozen or more bees. If you just take 1 teaspoon of honey, that means that one honey bee has spent its entire life collecting the honey, and like that there are multiple honeybees who have done that for 1 teaspoon of honey. So think of that when you next time. So all these articles that we are presenting to the Lord, we should realize that that is the prasadam that we are enjoying. If you directly start to taste the honey and start enjoying the honey, then you are riding on top of the work of so many honeybees. Imagine if you have to do work for all your lifetime, and then somebody else is taking the teaspoon, and many people, all of the people assembled here, let's say you're all collecting honey for the entire life, and then somebody comes and takes it away and just, so nice. I'll take it with my cereal in the morning. It is better than sugar. Come on, I've been spending all my time. But that is not what is being spoken of here. This is something even before that. Imagine there is a honeybee completely undisturbed. No person is going and taking the honey and enjoying. Honeys are enjoying on their own. That should be nice, no? You are spending time to earn your livelihood. Nobody outside is coming and taking away the honey. So you are able to enjoy. So that should be a nice thing. Nice life of honeybee. Little bit of work it has to do in collecting the honey, but ultimately what it gets to enjoy is very tasty honey. Even human beings find it tasty. So what could be the problem? Let us see. Very interesting. The so-called happiness of this material creation is exactly like the bee's enjoyment of honey after it has been collected in the honeycomb. Actual reality of the honey is more like this. Okay, just go back again. We think of honey like this, but the reality of honey is like this. Just look at the swarm of bees. It's not that it is getting nice personal space, like 3 feet by 3 feet space. Nobody touches you in the queue, nobody pushes you, and you can nicely, peacefully come in a way and keep the honey in a personal bank account, and then later withdraw it to a personal bank account and enjoy it when nobody is looking. That is not the life of the honeybee. Honeybee has to deal with this kind of a swarm. That's why it's called the swarm of bees. And that life is actually not easy life. Remaining within the hearts of all living entities, the Lord bestows the remembrance by which the living entities can enjoy certain things. So the honeybee also has the Lord in the heart. And the honeybee is being taught by the Lord, oh, you want to enjoy sweetness of honey? I'll show you how to do it. And the Lord is inspiring the honeybee to go to this flower. This has very nice honey, take it. Go to this flower, take it, go to this flower. All this instruction, where is the honeybee getting from? It is getting from the Lord only, seated in the heart. Thus, the living entities create their own enjoyable honeycombs and then enjoy them. The example of bees is appropriate because when bees try to enjoy their honeycomb, they have to suffer the bites of other bees. They have to suffer the bites of the other bees. Because bees bite one another when they enjoy honey, they are not exclusively enjoying the sweetness of honey, for there is also suffering. In other words, the living entities are subjected to the pains and pleasures of material enjoyment, whereas Supreme Personality of Godhead, knowing their plans for sense enjoyment, is aloof from them. The first time when I saw this verse, or insubordination immediately came out. I said, really? Honeybees bite each other? I thought only honeybees stung each other. I had a difficulty, okay, honeybees biting. But you can see any time you have any doubt about scriptures, as you're reading, all of our minds are rebellious. We don't accept. This is the reason why one chanting of Hare Krishna is not sufficient for us to become purified. Otherwise, one chanting of Hare Krishna is sufficient. Because we have so much doubt and disbelief in what we read, we are unable to accept it. So, therefore, when the analogy is given, when we try to apply it to our life, we never accept it. Why? Because we could not even see the analogy to begin with. So, honeybees biting each other, actually it is a fact. Honeybees bite. When honeybee stings, it is dangerous to its own life. When a honeybee stings, usually it dies. When a bee stings a person, it is an existential threat. When the honeybee perceives existential threat, it is actually like a suicide bomber in a way. Because when it stings a person, after that it cannot survive. It is like draining the entire blood from your body to hurt someone. Imagine that if you have to attack, somebody is attacking you, you have to counterattack, and to defend yourself, you have to give out all your blood. How it will be? That is the honeybee sting. It is not something that it will just do lightly like that. But it does that to protect the other bees. So the sting of the honeybee is rare, but so when they are together in the swarm, they don't sting each other, but they do bite. Honeybees can bite. There is a rare occasion when they sting each other also. I read up something on this. When the queen bee, how many queen bees are there in one beehive? One. So did you ever wonder, like, how come, like, when somebody has a child, they can have both girl and boy, right? How is it that only one queen is there? So, of course, queen is not the ordinary bee. That's a special bee, special girl bee. There can be other girl bees also who are not queens. But this queen bee, if by chance there are more than one queen bees born, what happens to them? They sting each other until only one survives. They kill each other until only one queen bee survives. But there are also other situations where other worker bees, they bite each other. Even slightly, if some worker bee is going outside their lane, they're supposed to do something, they do something different, immediately the nearby worker bees will come and they'll start biting. And if, let us say, there are bees coming from a nearby honeycomb, let's say there are two trees, two branches, there are two honeycombs. Bees from one honeycomb, by chance they forget and they come to the other honeycomb, what will happen to them? They're bitten. They're bitten and repelled away. They're not stung, they're bitten. Because if they're stung, they'll probably die. But material nature wants you to enjoy and suffer. It's a package deal. So, on one hand, the Lord is, as Paramatma, teaching the honeybee how to get the honey. And while the honey is being enjoyed, suffering is given. This is the process of instruction. So the sweetness of honey, you also have to undergo suffering. Thus the Lord simply witnesses and gives the living entity sanction for sense enjoyment. Okay, if you want sense enjoyment, if you are so particular about it, you want to be independent, take it. But the Lord cannot give up on us. He never gives up on us. As his affection has his own parts and parcels, he has higher plan, so he never gives up. And so he's entrusting us to this agency of external energy by which we may also get the suffering and thereby get reformed. It is the Paramatma also who gives the intelligence by which bees can construct a hive, collect honey from various flowers, store it and enjoy it. Although the Paramatma is aloof from the living entities, he knows their intention and gives them facilities by which they can enjoy or suffer the results of their actions. Human society is exactly like a beehive. In fact, I don't know how many of you know, but there's a company called Beehive. Huh? Do you know what they do? There's a company called Beehive. That's the name of the company. They give co-working spaces. So you can go and rent a workstation. Let's say you don't have an office or something. You can go rent a workstation and work there. It'll be called Beehive. It's a global company. It's there in America, India also it is there. So that is actually a good analogy, because anyone who goes to work knows that life is not enjoy. How many of you enjoy your work? I mean, people say, no, I love my work. It's my passion. Yeah, but if the same salary was given to you without work, would you still be doing that work? Nobody will want to do that. Nobody will want to do that. So when you go to work, you think that you're having nice intellectual challenge, you're trying to solve all kinds of problems, but then you get bitten by co-workers, boss, HR, everybody, right? And very aptly, there's a company called Beehive, so that you can go and do that with of course, people don't have the Bhagavatam perspective, so therefore they don't know, they think, oh, such a nice, cool name. Human society is exactly like a beehive. For everyone is engaged in collecting honey from various flowers and collecting honey from various sources and creating large empires for common enjoyment. However, after these empires are created, the bites of other nations have to be suffered. Sometimes nations declare war upon one another, and human behaves become sources of misery. So today's verse also, there is a talk about nations, nation states, and how there is an extreme form of this forgetfulness. You see how Prabhupada's purports, when they're related in concept, you'll see that the purport also has similar analogies, and it has very similar theme. It's actually mind-boggling how the verses in one book, when they have a certain purport and they're speaking about some concepts to explain that purport, and similar concept is there in another verse in Bhagavatam, which is completely different, Chaitanya Charitamrita Bhagavatam. And their verses and the way the purports are described, the concepts are very similar. For example, the Chaitanya Charitamrita quote that we spoke about today, Krishna Bholya She Jiva, Anadi Bahirmukha, in that there is a description of the different kinds of being, that is external energy, marginal persons who are in marginal potency, Tatastha Shakti. And here there is a talk about Nitya Baddha, who are conditioned, eternally conditioned. And where that Chaitanya Charitamrita verse is actually quoted in Bhagavatam, that is there in 4th canto, there the same Nitya Baddha is being talked about. Nitya Baddha and Nitya Mukta is being talked about. So where you see that the verses, when they are quoted in different places, it's not just the verse being quoted, but the entire purport and the explanation and the context, everything has a lot of overlap. And for Prabhupada to have just had clarity of all these verses and their purports in the head, 18,000 verses of Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita being 9 books by itself, 80 books being written on these subjects, it is just mind-boggling. It is really, truly superhuman by any stretch of imagination. So these bites have to be suffered. Bites of other nations have to be suffered. Now, there is one more reference that we saw in the verse, that in the purport that we saw, that there is the past, present, and future. Because our enjoyment is in the present, for sure. Some of the enjoyment is in the present. But a lot of our efforts are towards gathering resources for future. If you look at the bees, what are they doing? They're collecting the honey. Are they eating the honey at the time? They're not eating they're just carrying the honey. And they are accumulating in the beehive so that they can enjoy it later. And that's why our activities are exactly like that, because we also endeavor so much, and what we need at that moment is very little, very little. But the effort that we undertake is so much, but majority of that effort is for a later time, not for the present. There are 2 concepts that I would like to place before you for understanding this aspect. Because if we understand our own efforts in how we spend our time, we can become a little bit more aware of it and moderate our efforts. First concept is the concept of past, present, and future. How do you define past and how do you define future? Just think about it for a minute. What is future? Anybody would like to attempt to say what future is? What is future? Just simple English word future, nothing deep about it, very simple. I mean, there's no trick question here. You don't know what's coming. Yeah, that you're trying to give an explanation of what future is. But what is future itself? How do you define future? Just, yes, English definition. It doesn't exist. That is a characteristic of future. But what is future?
Something which will happen later.
Yes, something which will happen later. That means that's already time. It's like defining later. Later is a synonym of future. Right? So you're defining future with a synonym of future. But how do we define future without using the synonym? Which is yet to come. Yet to come. So there is something that is there presently, and after the present is over, something is about to happen, and that is future. It's very difficult to define it, right? If it's just such a simple word, we use it all the time. It's not easy to understand what it is. So let us just say mathematically, let's say there is a time axis, and you are presently in the time axis, one point. So there is a past, which already happened. There is a future, which is yet to come, and there is a present, which is currently happening. So this, because we are the present is the current time that's happening right now, correct? In this axis, what is the thickness of this current time? Very minimal, right? It's infinitesimally small, very, very small. It's a small dot. Because the moment that dot is over, immediately the next moment comes. So there is one theoretical physicist who speaks about this, who says the past does not exist now. Correct? The past does not exist now. It doesn't exist. It's already happened. The future does not exist now. And the present barely exists. Because it is so tiny that it barely exists. So past is not existing, future is not existing, the present is barely existing. What is this experience that we are having right now? But based on this, our entire life is running. The experience of the present, lamentation about the past, and anticipation of future. Now the next point that comes is this experience that we are having of past, present, and future. It is said that, we saw that in one of the purports that we just read today, that this is there in the material world, and this experience is not there in the spiritual world. Because this experience of time, the way material kala, it is absent in the spiritual world. And we also see how those who are on the absolute platform, they are called Trikalagya. The Lord is Trikalagya, knows past, present, and future. Also pure devotees of the Lord are aware of past, present, and future. So often to our conditioned minds, it is very difficult to understand. How can you be simultaneously aware of past, present, and future? How is it possible? How is it possible to know what is past, present, and future? Now, and why is it, this is not the most important thing in remembering Krishna. But because our conditioned minds are rebellious, our lives are constructed. If you see today's verse, it is saying that we are not taking the advice of the Shastras, although the Shastras are meant to help us get out of this honeycomb existence that we have. But we are not taking the guidance of Shastras because our head is already filled with all these ideas about enjoyment, about past, present, and future. And when we talk about, no, you're not seeing this, but a pure devotee can see this. He can see the past, present, and future, and he can see how you're headed. We are unable to accept it. How can you see what is past, present, and future? I came across this in the material world itself, how scientists, and based on that, some half-baked knowledge of that science, everybody is thinking that it is impossible to know past, present, and future. But how, even in the material world, how there is actually a paradigm where past, present, and future don't exist. Are you aware of this? That in the material world, as per the scientist, there is a paradigm, there is a situation in which past, present, and future don't exist and time doesn't act. And that is the experience of a particle of light. If you look at time, how it is measured, how atomic clock is measured. It is measured as the movement of the rays of sun. See, when the sun is moving in the sky, we know time is moving, right? When that is divided further, we say this daytime, nighttime. And that is further subdivided, hour, minute, etc. The measurement of the time is when a sun ray moves across an atom. That is the smallest unit of time. So the light is a measurement of time since time immemorial. That is how time has been measured, is through movement of light. Now when the physicists study light, so light is emanating from the sun, it is coming here. And they say that it takes 8 minutes to come, right? And when it comes from the moon, they say it takes some seconds to come. So they have studied this movement of light. But one more thing that they have studied is, but for the light itself, if you ask the particle of light, how much time did it take to come from sun to earth? Would it say, I took 8 minutes? What would it say? According to the physicists, they say, no, because time is relative. When you ask the particle of light as to how much time did you take to come from earth to sun, it will say, what are you talking about? I was in both places at once. That's what it will say. The time, the ray of light which originated from the Big Bang, according to the scientists, I'm talking about modern science here. The ray of light that originated from the Big Bang, when it reaches our eyes, you might have, they may say the 13.4 billion years years have lapsed. But for the particle of light, it started from the Big Bang and the same instant it reached you. Same instant it reached you. For the particle of light, past, present, and future do not exist. In science. This is in science. Now, of course, after some 10 years, they may change their position. So these are theories of science. But I'm just saying that based on some half-baked knowledge of science, we are unable to accept that in the spiritual world, in the absolute realm, relative time does not exist. But even in the material world, by the scientist, this is the understanding that is there. So, in our rebellious attempts, of course, we should simply take the words of the Shastra. Then we'll cut short all the time that is required in doubt. But our minds are difficult. They are not. So when you're reading the Shastra, look at it from the point of view of, this is true. I don't understand how it is true. Yes, you may make efforts to understand how it is true. Sometimes we may get some corroborating evidence. Sometimes we may not get corroborating evidence. But nevertheless, this beehive is created for reforming us so that we get intelligence to enjoy, because that's what we want to do. The Lord does not want to interfere with our free will. And we are also given suffering so that we may get understanding that this is not the place of permanence. And now when we try to say, okay, what is the way out? The Lord gives us Shastra, Shastra Krit. So He is the compiler of the Vedas. And so by studying those Shastras, by the exact phrase that was used in today's purport, what is that phrase that, sorry, not here. Program of life, yes. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is the guiding principle for all human beings. But by the spell of material energy, they do not take care to carry out the programs of life in terms of the Bhagavad Gita. So here is the temple created by Srila Prabhupada to specifically help us accept the programs of life as given by Bhagavad Gita. This is so that we may get out of this honeycomb of existence and go back home, back to Godhead, where you don't have the package deal of suffering and enjoyment. I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments. There are no questions. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaur Prema.